Unless you were living under a rock between the years of 2011 and 2014, you've probably heard of the Divergent series. Set in a dystopian city where people are sorted into 5 factions based on their personal values and traits, 16-year-old Beatrice Pryor takes a test to determine which faction she belongs in. Tris discovers that she's divergent, someone who fits into more than one faction. But in this world, divergent people are considered dangerous, so Tris has to keep it secret at all costs. At her choosing ceremony, Tris decides to leave her home faction, the Selfless Abnegation, to join Dauntless, which values bravery. Now she must navigate the cutthroat Dauntless initiation process while hiding the truth of who she is. Divergent was my favorite book when I was 12. I'd never read a YA dystopian novel before, or a YA book period, and I was hooked by the immediate writing style and inventive concept. I also remember loving the Divergent movie that came out in 2014, not quite as much as the book, but I thought at the time that it was a great adaptation of a story that meant so much to me. Now that I'm 25 and I've read a lot more YA and dystopian books since then, I wanted to revisit Divergent to see if I would like it half as much as I did back in the day. So I reread the book and I rewatched the movie, and oh boy, I have some thoughts. My name is Ellie Blackwood. I'm a sci-fi and fantasy writer who loves overanalyzing my favorite media, and today I'm breaking down my newfound beef with the Divergent movie. This video is a little shorter than my usual half-hour plus fare because I have some absolutely gargantuan projects coming up and I needed to work on something a bit more manageable to bridge the gap. I have some special author guests who will be featuring on my channel soon, and trust me, you do not want to miss them. In the meantime, if you like video essays about books, TV, Doctor Who, and all that goodness, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And also be sure to subscribe to my free monthly newsletter to get updates on all my latest projects and content. I recently moved my newsletter to Patreon, where you can find a new tier that gives you early access to all my videos and even more bonuses, including a special cut for time segment of this very video. The link for all of that is in the description. I've been planning to reread Divergent for a while, but the big precipitating event was Veronica Roth's announcement that this fall she will be releasing a new Divergent book called The Sixth Faction. This is the first in an alternate universe duology version of the Divergent series where Tris didn't pick the Dauntless faction. At first, I didn't quite know how to feel about it because I have a sense of protectiveness over the original book. But the original Divergent is still there. This is just a new, different story. Roth has spoken about how she wrote The Sixth Faction to recapture the joy she feels about Divergent after years of internalizing negative criticism about the series, and to use the skills she's learned from writing her 10 more recent novels to revisit the world in an exciting new way. I hope it does help Roth heal her relationship to her work, and I'm excited to see what she'll do with the story now that she's had another decade of writing experience. Of course, it became even more imperative for me to refresh my memory of what happened in Divergent so I can pick up on whatever Easter eggs might appear in the Sixth Faction. I have a lot of fond memories about this book, so part of me was a little scared to reread it. 'Cause what if I don't like it? What if I ruin everything it once meant to me? Turns out I really shouldn't have worried. I have read a lot of YA dystopian stories in the years since I last read Divergent, and thankfully Divergent is still one of my favorites. A huge amount of my enjoyment of the book does come from nostalgia, but it's also just a well-executed, well-paced story with some great character work. It's that last point that became the Divergent movie's downfall. You see, the Divergent book is a character piece, and the Divergent movie is not a very good character piece. Dystopian novels always involve social commentary. For example, The Hunger Games is about class inequality, propaganda, and entertainment being used as a way to dehumanize certain groups, all brought about by an oppressive government. Divergent involves some societal upheaval over governance, but its main source of commentary isn't really about the governmental system at all. Instead, it's about social conformity. What do you have to sacrifice to be part of a community? What do you have to prioritize? What do you have to believe? The reason that Divergent people are so dangerous to those in power is not just because they tend to be resistant to the mind-controlling serums that are often used throughout the story, but because they represent a move toward intercommunity dialogue. As in real life, people who profit off of division like to shut down efforts to foster understanding to preserve their own interests. The book explores the themes of navigating societal rifts by getting really intensely inside Tris's head. One of the reasons that Divergent initially blew me away at the age of 12 is that it's written in first-person present tense. This is a very immediate way of telling a story that I had never experienced before at the time, but it's actually very common in the YA category. However, upon rereading the novel, I do think Divergent has a level of interiority that stands out even among other YA books. When Triss switches from abnegation to dauntless, she experiences some very relatable struggles that will be instantly familiar to anyone who's ever tried to fit in with a new community. Her aptitude test showed that she has an aptitude for both factions, but that doesn't mean she can easily slot into dauntless or easily stay in abnegation. She has to figure out which tendencies and urges are authentic to her, which ones are a social consequence of her being brought up in abnegation, and which ones are just her desperately trying to fit in with dauntless. More importantly, she must decide whether to agree with the values that the Dauntless leaders set, or to build her own ethical framework based on what she thinks is right. And you might be like, oh, she just struggles to acclimate to Dauntless because she's Divergent, but we see other characters who aren't Divergent struggling to acclimate to their new factions too. The story of Divergent is about the dynamics of being in community with others, which is why it's frustrating that the movie oversimplifies the faction system in a way that takes out a lot of the social commentary and kind of just turns it into a BuzzFeed quiz. The Divergent book clearly states that the factions are about your ethos, what you value most, what trait you think is most needed to make the world a better place. But the movie cuts out all discussion of the factions' values and makes it only about the individual personalities of the people in them. An example of this is the scene where Triss's dauntless love interest, Four, shows Triss his tattoo of all the 5 faction symbols. In the book, Four explains, "I think we've made a mistake. We've all started to put down the virtues of the other factions in the process of bolstering our own. I don't want to do that. I want to be brave and selfless and smart and kind and honest." In the movie, Four's line is,
"I don't want to be just one thing. I can't be. I want to be brave, and I want to be selfless, intelligent, and honest, and kind."
The book version of Four frames the values in terms of society as a whole, expressing a desire to have his faction be more open to other ideas and examine things from multiple angles. The movie version is solely focused on his own personal attributes. The reason why the book is a dystopia is that it isn't good to trap yourself in a bubble of people who enforce a particular way of life and look down upon anyone who goes about things differently. But many people in the modern world do just that by trapping themselves in an echo chamber and buying into the idea that their in-group is inherently the best and the out-groups are inherently lesser. The book engages with this theme in moments like the visiting day scene, where the parents of the Dauntless initiates come to visit their children, and we get some insight into how people try to maintain their own sense of their community's values when interacting with members of other factions. The movie cuts this scene and doesn't really touch this theme at all. It's only natural for movies to lack the interiority of a novel, because you have to show everything visually rather than getting properly inside the character's head. So while I didn't find Triss to be as compelling in the Divergent movie as she is in the book, I don't entirely blame the movie for that, because it couldn't give me the same insight into her feelings and choices as the book could. Unfortunately, like I said before, I think Divergent's big strength is as a character study. Take something like the aptitude test scene. In the book, we get a detailed look at why Triss makes each of her choices, which is really important to know because this test is meant to sort her into a faction based on her values. You can easily infer which of her choices correspond to each faction's belief system. The movie can't properly show Triss's reasons for making her choices, and it also truncates the scene probably for runtime reasons, so it doesn't give as much insight into the way Triss thinks. On screen, you have to shape an audience's understanding of a character based solely on their actions and reactions. But while I can give the movie some leniency because of the medium, I don't think it characterized Triss as well as it could have. For example, the movie combines the second and third stage of Dauntless initiation from the book, so instead of one stage learning to handle a scary hallucination and then a stage of facing their actual fears, the initiates get a single stage of simulating their actual fears. In the book, one of Triss's Stage 2 simulations is being attacked by birds in a field, which isn't a real fear she has to begin with. It only ends up becoming one of her fears in the third stage because the Stage 2 simulation frightened her so much. This shows us just how much the Dauntless initiation is taking a psychological toll on Triss. The movie obviously wanted to show the bird simulation because it's a scene in the book, but this time it's portrayed as one of Triss's actual fears that she had before she arrived at Dauntless. So what does this fear actually tell us about Triss? Well, it doesn't tell us anything useful, really. Similarly, one of Triss's fear landscape scenes from the movie is Four trying to sexually assault her. This could indicate that she's scared Four might hurt or betray her, but there's nothing else in the movie to back this up. The real reason this scene is here is because, again, it's an out-of-context adaptation of something from the book. The book makes a point of showing that this is Triss and For's first love, with all the awkwardness and intensity of feeling that comes with it. Triss has a whole arc of being nervous about physical intimacy, and For also shares that despite being 2 years older than her, being romantically involved with someone is new for him too. One of the scenes in Triss's fear landscape is being in a situation where For wants to sleep with her and she has to tell him no. In the book, her fear isn't that For will force her to do anything, but that he wants something from her that she isn't ready to give him and he'll be disappointed. In the end, For reassures Triss that he isn't disappointed that she isn't ready for that yet, and he's happy to wait for as long as she needs. In the movie, the extent of Triss's intimacy arc is a single line where she tells For that she doesn't want to go too fast, and this weird fear landscape scene that has a very different implication to the one in the book and doesn't have a clear connection to the rest of Triss's journey. Compare that to one of Triss's other fears, her being locked in a tank filling with water while the other initiates look on and laugh at her. This shows that Triss feels wary of the people around her and worries that even her friends might turn on her. Again, I know people expect to see the birds and the scene with For because they're in the book. But given that they combined the training stages and cut the focus on Triss's fear of intimacy, it would have been more efficient to use the screen time to show fears that give Triss a stronger characterization for the purposes of the movie. Another character moment that kind of baffled me came at the beginning of the movie, where Triss and her family see the villainous erudite faction's leader Janine Matthews at the choosing ceremony and have a tense exchange with her. Triss has a moment of standing up to Janine pretty strongly in this scene, and given that she spends the first few minutes of the movie being pretty quiet, I'm not sure where that sudden burst of snark came from. Especially because she's with her family, who are already making it pretty clear to Janine that they see through her veneer of politeness.
That's not supposed to be a choice. The test should tell us what to do.
You're still free to choose.
But you don't really want that.
Was Triss stressed out about the choosing ceremony? Did she think her family were being too polite to Janine? Has she been stewing over her frustration with the faction system and just let it out now? I simply cannot say because this scene wasn't in the book, so I can't reference it to find out what Triss was thinking in that moment. Honestly, I think a lot of the movie's scenes with Janine are just there because they managed to book Kate Winslet and they wanted to give her more of a central role because she's famous. One character moment in the movie I really liked was how the evil Dauntless leader Eric tells Triss he doesn't think she'll shoot him, and she responds, "I think you might be overestimating my character." It's a peek at how Triss has been grappling with the tension between her desire to treat others well and her desire to hurt her enemies, and it adds an extra twist of complexity to our noble heroine. However, in the book, we actually see Triss working through these feelings about her moral code throughout the story. The overestimating my character line is still there in the book, albeit at a slightly different moment, but it serves as a continuation of an arc that Triss has had for the entire story, not as a little extra garnish. Again, though, the medium of film has its limitations, so I can't expect the same level of character building that we had in the book. But the handling of Triss's character is far from the biggest crime that this movie commits in terms of character building. Oh no, that award goes to our favorite number. The way the Divergent movie handled the character of For, the young initiation instructor who becomes Triss's love interest, was pretty atrocious. In the first instance, Theo James does not look 18, but it would be one thing if he just looked slightly too old for the part he was playing. The real problem is he doesn't act 18 either. I couldn't find the original clip to confirm, but I found several websites referencing that Shailene Woodley, who plays Triss, said in an Access Hollywood interview that they aged For up to about 24 or 25 in the movie, and they didn't specify Triss's age so that she could theoretically be older than 16 too, which I'm just going to ignore because I don't like that. Both the book and movie version of For are certainly tough and secretive and courageous, but the book version of For has a vulnerable side that you just don't get from the movie version because that's an adult man. I know 18 is legally an adult, but you get what I mean. In the book scene where For and Triss go through For's fear landscape, Triss takes charge of guiding a terrified For through his fears, and even attacks the simulated version of his abusive father to protect him. For is being genuinely vulnerable with her, and he even states that he's inviting her into his fear simulation because he wants to open up to her. In the movie, For handles most of his fear simulations all by himself, and while the mere act of inviting Triss into the simulation shows that he's interested in showing her his secrets, he states that it's to help her train for her own fear landscape test. In June 2026, Veronica Roth wrote an article on her blog about how much of her work revolves around, quote, the moment when a character exposes themselves to another character so that they can be fully known. And she mentioned For's vulnerability in this fear landscape scene as an example of that. I just think it's a shame that the movie took a character moment that feels so central to this story and watered down what made it so meaningful in the first place. There is also no indication in the movie of Four's lack of experience with romance, because again, that's an adult man. Obviously, there are plenty of 25-year-olds who've never dated anyone, but a 25-year-old has a level of self-assurance with their personal relationships that an 18-year-old lacks. Overall, the movie's version of Four doesn't have anywhere near the level of vulnerability that we get from the book's version, which makes him feel like less of a complex, realistic character and more of a stereotype of a brooding bad boy love interest. There's a scene where Tris decides to climb up a Ferris wheel to get a higher vantage point for a training exercise, and Four decides to follow her up, which is when she discovers that he's afraid of heights. In the movie, Four just has a couple of lines that indicate he's uncomfortable with the height, and he gets a bit sweaty. In the book, Four is more obviously rattled by the height, but he still acts quickly to save Tris when she tries to climb higher and a rung breaks off. This frightening experience brings the two of them closer together. The movie completely skips this peril and just cuts to the next scene after Tris and Four get to the correct height to achieve their goal. Tris and Four's relationship gets a lot more development in the book than it does in the movie, and while you expect that some things would have to get cut for time, it's still kind of disappointing. Honestly, I feel like the Ferris wheel scene was mainly there in the movie because it was an iconic scene in the book and fans expect it. Similarly, there's a scene where Tris gets invited by some dauntless initiates to go on a high-octane zipline, and in the book, this is used as a way to drive a wedge between her and her other transfer initiate friends Christina and Will, who didn't get to go. In the movie, it's just there for fun, I guess? While the movie keeps the way Tris's friend Al betrays her because he's worried about his rank and wants to take her out, it cuts the way that Will and Christina get wary of Tris because they feel like she's getting special treatment and hiding things from them. And that's a shame because that tension was a great way to increase the sense of danger in the book, where Tris isn't totally sure if she can count on her friends. Overall, the Divergent movie functions fine as a dystopian action thriller, but I think it misses the heart of what made the book really shine for me. Some of the more interior character work and complex relationships had to be cut for time or couldn't easily be adapted for film, of course, but I still think the movie missed several opportunities to bring some more of the book's magic to the screen. Every event in the book is in service of Tris's emotional journey, whereas the movie removes a lot of these moments from their proper context and from their emotional impact. I loved the movie when I was a kid because it was a chance to see a story I already loved come to life. However, if I hadn't already read the book and gotten inside Tris's head in such an immersive way, I'm not sure the movie would have impacted me as much on its own. But all that is just my opinion, so I really want to hear from you. Were you a fan of Divergent back in the day? Have you read or watched it recently, or do you plan to? Are you planning to read The Sixth Faction? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments, because I'm really excited to discuss. Subscribe to my channel for more video essays like this one, and check out my Patreon for my free monthly newsletter and a bunch more bonuses. The link to that is in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.